Hello and welcome. My name is Adam Lane, and this is the search for terrestrial intelligence. Imagine, if you will, a group of extraterrestrial aliens have just landed on this planet, and they have begun their search for terrestrial intelligence. They find the planet inhabited by a fairly large population of relatively advanced furless primates. And so the next logical progression is that they want to meet this world's leadership. They want to know who these humanoid inhabitants have chosen or accepted to be their leadership. Maybe you're picking up where I'm going with this. What do they find? Do they find a group of people with integrity, honor, intelligence, and high moral standards? No, they don't. Instead, they find psychopaths, criminals, tyrants, and buffoons. So what do you think their assessment would be of human intelligence after that first observation? And how would you judge human development, human progress, and intelligence? Myself, I look at our art, our music, creativity, innovation. Yes, science and mathematics. But when I take a hard look, when I look at the big picture, I can't help but notice that we are not where we should be in human development. It is common knowledge that domesticated species have a diminished intelligence, vitality, and capability than their wild counterparts. This has been observed for thousands of years. It is also fairly common that the human is considered to be the only self-domesticated animal on the planet. Now, I have a real problem with this, because it's really hard for me to imagine that any animal would voluntarily self-domesticate. Looking back at the human fossil record, it's really apparent and very clear that the pre-agrarian humans, the hunter and gatherers, had better bone density. They had much better teeth. They were overall by far healthier, and one can assume much more intelligent, with a greater vitality and capability, just like every other wild animal is in comparison to its domesticated variety. So, when we look at where we are as a species, this has to be considered. If humans did not voluntarily self-domesticate, then there's the question: how did this occur? How did the human animal become a domesticated species? I think if you look at it honestly, it's very clear. A subset of humanity made the decision that it was capable of domesticating the vast majority of the human population. This happened at the dawn of civilization. I don't really separate this dawn of civilization, the beginning of human civilization, with this domestication of humanity. To me, they're the same. This is the same event in my mind. And in the very origins of civilization, we see the origin of a ruling class. We see the beginnings of a very small minority of the population having total authority over the vast majority of the population. And this is no different than any other domesticated species. Every farm, the animals will far outnumber the farmers. In every zoo, the captives far outnumber their keepers. And so when you look at this group, this what I call a predator class or a parasitic class that had determined that it had the authority to use violence and coercion to contain and captivate the rest of humanity. This was the act that began to hold back human development. Human development from that point on was then promoted, endorsed and funded and facilitated by this parasitic class, the predator class, the ruling class. If it wasn't in their interest, it didn't happen. And you only need to look at, for instance, the history of the development of the oil industry to recognize that the groups and individuals in charge of the oil industry decided for the rest of humanity that oil was how things would operate, that oil was going to be the fuel source for civilization. This wasn't a decision that was made because it's the best fuel source. It was made because they knew that they could profit the most and control civilization and control humanity the most by controlling this particular fuel source. When you're diagnosing an ailment, you need to look holistically. So in diagnosing the human condition, am I saying that all the problems lead to the dawn of civilization? Am I trying to say that all the problems are because of the ruling elite and point to say that's the poison right there that sent mankind down the wrong path? No, I'm not. I am attempting to analyze or diagnose the situation to get to the roots of the imbalance, to get to the roots of the dis-ease. I don't think it's as simple as pointing the finger at at one thing and saying this is the problem. Everything is much more complex than that. Every living organism, every living system, every ecosystem is self-organizing, self-correcting, self-healing. What happens is, for instance, in a human body, is the amount of toxins that come into the system through bad diet, the amount of damage that is done to the system through inactivity or through just really unhealthy living practices, unhealthy living styles. All of these things that we do to ourselves, they compound. And the acceleration into a incoherent living system, that acceleration outpaces the correction. We are a self-healing, self-organizing, self-correcting biological system. But if the damage being done outpaces the correction, then the organism steadily decays into further and further and further dis-ease, and eventually will succumb to those problems. To stay healthy, all one needs to do is to facilitate that self-healing. All one needs to do to be a healthy, thriving organism is to facilitate that self-correction and self-healing. And you do that by not continually adding toxic food. You do that by becoming active, to move your muscles, to create blood flow, to create circulation, to breathe fresh air, to get sunshine, all those kinds of things, really basic, simple things. If you do these things, you become healthy. If you don't do them, your system can't keep up. It can't correct itself fast enough. I looked at humanity and I wanted to know when, if ever, was humanity okay? When did we live in a balanced and harmonious state? And I discovered that the Taoist, the ancient Taoists, in their development of Chinese medicine, they spoke of this problem. And they spoke of the time when it began. They called it the time of the Great Separation, because they understood that connection, harmony with your environment, connection to the living system of the planet kept people healthy. And then when people stepped out of that flow, when they stepped away from nature and decided that they were something other than nature, and they started to live against nature instead of with it, they started to live upon the earth instead of with the earth, then everything starts to get messed up. Then it all goes bad. And they observed this happen in China just as it happened in other places in the world. Everywhere that humanity progressed into this state of incoherency. What archaeologists believe to be the very first city was called Urk, and it was back 4,200 BC. In that city, they discovered the very first evidence of a clearly stratified society that had developed a ruling elite. also found it interesting in looking into how Urk came to be. Urk, I believe. I don't know if I'm saying this correctly. They noticed the development of settlements increasing and increasing in size. What started as little round huts and very small amounts of farming or growing some crops, these societies were still hunting and gathering quite a lot, but that they had settled. And then the beginnings of agriculture and the beginnings of domestication started at this time. As these settlements grew, they became little square houses, and they're pushing them closer and closer together to the point where they were sharing walls and growing into these massive settlements. And as these early settlements grew and spread and grew and spread, then Urk became a center of trade and a center of the population's growth. And Urk emerged as the very first city in the world that we know of. And in that city, you see the beginnings of this inequality and this separation of the classes. So what I'm looking at is humans were free and wild, roaming, moving with the seasons, living with nature. With their lifestyle came a balance of population, and with the movement, relieving stress on the environment as they migrated with the seasons, then decided to stop this healthy movement, creating settlements to where then their population became concentrated. And then this grew and grew, and that cluster of humanity became more and more concentrated. And at this point, where it was so concentrated, the emergence of inequality, stratification, and a ruling elite, and what is considered to be the beginning of civilization. From that point, exponential growth from that point on has brought us to this condition that we live in right now. It is not looking, it's not that impressive when you look at the progress of humanity from the perspective of where we are now. And if we had developed to the point we are now without losing that connection, if we didn't have that separation from coherency, from naturally balanced states of existence, a coherent and connected living system, where might we be as a species if we had a different growth process than that? I think it would look very different. And I don't mean we would still be running around, hunter and gatherers either. I believe we could have advanced and remain connected. I believe it's possible. I also believe it's possible to reconnect. Right now, your body, your system, is constantly, 100% of the time, in a process of self-healing. It never stops. It is constantly happening. Your system, 100% of the time, is in a process of self-healing. You would notice this if you facilitated that and you started to do things that helped that process instead of things that fought against it. Everybody who does this experiences this. Everybody who starts to eat correctly, get more exercise, and so on and so forth. Stop fighting the natural process of self-correction, and correction occurs. It would be the same for humanity, same for civilization, same for every living system on the planet. Stop damaging the system, and the system will self-correct. Stay tuned. Do all those things. Whether you have the like button or the dislike button, you can express your influence upon. Somewhere there's a subscribe button. You can push that. There's a bell right next to it. You can push that too. Just push all the buttons. Thank you for coming. My name is Adam Lane, and this is the Search for Terrestrial Intelligence.